I always thought that mirrors kept secrets, but I never imagined that one of them would show me the horror beyond my own reflection. It all began one stormy night, when the wind howled as if carrying lost souls with it, seeking refuge in the world of the living. The rain pounded the glass with such force that it seemed to want to break the barrier between its chaotic world and my apparent safety. That night, while exploring the attic of my new home, I found an antique mirror, covered in dust and cobwebs, as if it had been waiting for me for decades. Something about it caught my eye, an inexplicable sense of familiarity and dread. I decided to clean it and take it to my room, a mistake I would soon regret. The first few days were normal, except for the unusual cold surrounding the mirror. But then things began to change. My reflection began to distort, showing a version of me I didn't recognize. My eyes in the reflection had a malevolent gleam in them, and my smile, that smile was not mine. One night, I was startled awake by a whisper that seemed to come from the mirror. I got up and moved closer, and what I saw chilled my blood. My reflection was not mimicking my movements, but was writing something on the glass from the other side. With each stroke, a word formed, "Help me." I wanted to run, but my feet didn't respond. I was caught in the gaze of my own reflection, which was now pleading with a desperation that transcended the glass. The next few days were a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Researching the history of the mirror, I discovered that it belonged to a man who had disappeared without a trace many years ago. Legend had it that his soul was trapped in the mirror, doomed to relive his worst moments over and over again. Now, every night, the mirror shows me scenes from its past, and I feel something dark and ancient watching me from its surface. Something that wants out, something that wants to take my place. And I fear that one night, when the storm is strong enough and the world of the living and the dead become confused, that shadow in the mirror will finally break free. The nights became endless, each one more terrifying than the last. The mirror was no longer just an object in my room, it had become a doorway to a world that defied all logic and reason. The images it reflected were becoming clearer and clearer, more and more vivid. I saw the man in the mirror, his life, his mistakes, and the exact moment when his soul was trapped in that cursed crystal. One night, the storm raged with a fury that seemed personal. Lightning lit up my room with blinding flashes, and the thunder rumbled as if announcing the end of the world. That's when it happened. The mirror shook, and for an instant, the reflection faded, revealing a different room, a scene from another time and place. The man in the mirror stood there, struggling against a dark shadow that seemed to rise from the depths of the glass. He was screaming, pleading, but his voice had no sound. The shadow enveloped him, and I could feel his despair, his fear, his end. When the reflection returned, something had changed. It was no longer just the man looking at me from the other side, the shadow was there too, watching me with eyes that were not eyes, a presence that chilled me to the bone. I understood that the shadow did not want to be released, it wanted to trap another in its place. I decided to get rid of the mirror, but it wasn't that simple. Every attempt to move it resulted in freak accidents, unexplained injuries, and a feeling of being constantly watched. The shadow had spread its roots to my home, and I was next on the list. The tension grew every day. Friends and family began to worry about my erratic behavior, my obsession with the mirror. But how to explain to them that I was fighting something they could neither see nor understand? How to convince them that the danger was real and that each reflection could be my last? The fight against the shadow became my obsession. Sleepless nights, frantic research and ancient rituals filled my days. I was determined not to become another victim of the mirror, not to let my soul be replaced by that dark entity. One afternoon, as the sun was setting and the shadows were growing, I found an old book in a second-hand bookstore. The book talked about mirrors as portals and how to seal them. It was my hope, my last chance. I followed the instructions to the letter, preparing a circle of salt around the mirror and lighting black candles to protect my space. I began to recite the ancient words, feeling how the air was charged with electricity, how reality was distorted. Suddenly, the mirror went dark, and the shadow emerged, writhing and screaming in a forgotten language. The room grew cold, and the wind began to blow from nowhere, blowing out the candles one by one. The salt in the circle moved as if alive, and the shadow drew closer and closer. With each word of the incantation, I felt my energy drain, how the shadow struggled to maintain its connection to my world. But I did not give up. With the last candle going out, I spoke the final word, and a flash of blinding light filled the room. When my eyes got used to the darkness, I saw the mirror. The shadow was gone, and my reflection was once again mine alone. But something in me had changed, a part of my soul had gone with the shadow, leaving me empty, but free. The days that followed were quiet, but the peace came at a price. The mirror no longer reflected anything, it was a black, opaque surface. I buried it in a place where no one could find it, where the shadow could not harm anyone else. Sometimes, on stormy nights, I am tempted to look at the place where I buried the mirror, to dig it up and face the shadow once more. But I resist. Because I know that there are things in this world that must remain hidden, secrets that must remain secret. Days passed and life resumed its normal course, or so it seemed. People congratulated me on my new serene attitude, but deep down, I knew that something was lost forever. The shadow had left a mark on my soul, a scar that was unseen but felt every night when I closed my eyes. One afternoon, I received a package with no return address. Inside, there was a small hand mirror, antique and with the frame carved with strange symbols. At first, I thought about getting rid of it, but curiosity got the better of me. I looked into the mirror and, to my horror, I did not see my reflection. Instead, there was a pulsating darkness, and in that darkness, eyes were watching me. The shadow had returned, but this time it was not alone. I could sense other presences, other trapped souls who had fallen into its trap over the years. The shadow spoke to me without words, telling me that I had been a fool to think I could escape it, that I was now part of its realm. That night, the storm returned with an intensity one had never experienced. The wind blew angrily, as if it wanted to tear the house from its foundations. And in the midst of the chaos, the hand mirror lit up with a light of its own. The shadow materialized in front of me, more tangible and terrifying than ever. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, but the shadow did not respond. Instead, it extended its hand toward me, and I knew it wanted me to join it, to become one of its prisoners. But there was something the shadow didn't know. All this time, I had been preparing myself for this moment. With a swift movement, I pulled out a crystal I had consecrated for this purpose and hurled it at the shadow. There was a deafening scream, and the light from the mirror was extinguished. When it was all over, the shadow had disappeared, and with it, all the souls it had trapped. I stood there in the darkness, feeling for the first time in a long time a genuine relief. I had freed those lost souls and broken the cycle of the shadow. But I knew I had to remain vigilant, because the world is full of mysteries and some mirrors should never be looked into.